We'll hear from Bobby Williams, the athletic director at Sam Houston State, here in this hour. J.J. Joe, quarterback at Baylor for years, and now their color analyst on radio. He'll be a part of it, but right now joined by someone we got to know when he was in diapers as far as what he's doing now. Cody Kellner, a Ph.D. in research and college football statistician, joins us on 365 Sports and Sikkim 365 Radio. Cody, I remember when you first started, you kind of were banging on doors like a salesman, and you've been able to now kind of get your foot in the door. What are your thoughts about how college football right now and where the BCS, my God, that's almost a three-letter word. It is a three-letter word. How the college football playoff standings are being handled?
Well, hey, David, first of all, thanks for having me on. And no, that's a great question. You know, it seems like every year has always been a little bit different with the college football playoff in terms of the selection. I get it. There's a different committee that kind of rotates almost every year. I think a couple of people come in and off. But one thing that's common is how the Power Five teams are evaluated. You know, I know it's based a lot on strength of schedule. I did the CFP mock selection about 4 years ago. And I got to see how they looked at all the different metrics and how they do all the rounds of voting. And it's very interesting how it's all set up, because what they do is they look at the teams in small clusters of 6, and they take the top 3 from there, and then they rank those 3, and then they reevaluate the rest, and they just go through like 6 or 7 rounds. But nevertheless, you know, I was pretty surprised that Cincinnati was at number 6, considering they had a big quality win over at Notre Dame. I really thought they would have been in the top 4, such as they are in the AP poll. But you know, over the last 7 years, it just really seems like the Power 5 teams really they do get a lot more credit than the Group of 5 program.
So you look at what you do and you crunch these numbers. You mentioned Cincinnati. We had Dave Bartu on earlier this week, and he said doesn't matter. They're screwed because SMU and Houston are not in the top 25. They don't have another game, even though if they beat SMU or whoever they have down the stretch, it won't matter. Your thoughts about the way you look at that as well?
Well, you know, I'm a voter in the Super 16 poll, and I actually voted Cincinnati at number 3. I did put Alabama ahead of Cincinnati. I think when you look at Alabama, I know when you look at their resume, ironically, if you look at Alabama's resume in a certain way, it almost looks similar to Baylor. They've played just as many teams with a winning record, played as many bowl-eligible opponents and so forth. But, you know, with Alabama, it is really the eye test. They lost that game at Texas A&M, and I would argue that I think a lot of good teams in the country would have lost at Kyle Field that night. Not just Alabama, but I think a good number of teams would have lost that game as well to the Aggies. But now he's right. If Cincinnati wins out, unfortunately, I would like to see them get in, but I just really don't see how there's a path. Right now, there's 4 undefeated teams in 4 power conferences. There's never been a year where a team has gone undefeated in a Power 5 conference and missed the college football playoff. And so as of right now, we're on path to make that happen. If Wake Forest, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Michigan State continue to win out, I really don't see what would stop those 4 from making the playoff.
But, you know, we see that every year if so-and-so wins out or XYZ wins out. But in the end, Cody, that doesn't happen very often, does it?
You know, and that's a great question. You know, it seemed like to me in the BCS years, we had more chaos on conference championship weekend than what we do now. It seemed like the CFP, at least in my opinion, has been kind of lucky from a dramatical standpoint, in that the teams that needed to win on conference championship weekend normally have in the CFP era. I know the CFP gets a lot of criticism for selecting the same teams year in and year out. It seems like Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama. But I would also argue that when you look at the conference championships over the last 7 years in the CFP era, there's not much parity in the conferences. Except for the Pac-12, there's been some parity there. But Oklahoma's won the Big 12, Clemson, ACC, Alabama has kind of traded off with Georgia and some other teams, and Ohio State mostly from the Big 10. So when you look at the CFP rankings, a lot of that's driven by the same teams winning the conference championships year in and year out. But I think if we have some upsets on conference championship weekend, that may change that a little bit.
How much have people, from when you first started, and you can give everybody your story, I remember you used to be on with John, and then we had you on a couple of different times, and then things have changed a little bit. But how much do people now take what you do and give you a chance to be a part of the equation? You mentioned the Super 16 poll. I get that every single weekend, and it usually, to me, makes more sense to me than even the AP or the coaches poll.
Well, it's interesting. It seemed like my experience of getting to know people and being in different situations has slowly evolved over the last 20 years. Back in 2001, when I was a junior in college, I wanted to create a ranking system and be part of the BCS. And it seemed like when I got going with that, that's when the BCS ended and then the college football playoff came into play. But some things that helped me out was I was doing some independent research about 8 years ago, and I was doing some research on the BCS standings, and I found about 75 discrepancies in BCS media guides. So I contacted the BCS. I'm like, hey, I found all these discrepancies. Here's the data I found. And they went back and they double-checked it, and they said, all your numbers were right. And so that kind of got me a foot in the door with helping the BCS and the CFP out with, like, their record book and helping out the championship game and doing different types of research. I do research on the attendance and viewership for the New Year's Six games. So I've been fortunate with that. I've gotten on with the college with the Cotton Bowl Classic. Do all the game notes and records for all the college games at AT&T, and that kind of opened the door for me to get in with the SEC. I help out in Atlanta every year with the notes and records during the SEC championship. So those opportunities and getting to talk with different people as to kind of what they look at with the rankings and things like that, and I coupled that with what I learned back when I did the CFP mock selection, whereas I really don't do my computer ratings anymore. I do more resume type information, where I just like throw out information like how many times Georgia has defeated a team with a winning record and where that ranks among other teams in the country, or bowl eligible teams, or the CFP top 25. So I really just try to put objective information out there that really can't be disputed, and I try to give certain teams and conferences things that they can go and brag about, and maybe say, hey, this is why our team should be ranked higher than someone else's. So I'm trying to give all the fans in different conferences bragging points about their respective teams.
Well, I tell you what, you've done a really nice job to be right in the mix. Cody, I think what we'll do is we'll bring you back, not every week, but we'll bring you back between now and the final standings that come out to decide the semifinals. We appreciate your time. And Cody_Kellner is how you can find Cody on Twitter. It's worth it to look at that Twitter feed or be a part of it and follow it. Cody Kellner, thank you for your time. Armstrong, we're going to break here. We're going to go to Bobby Williams. We're going to call